The intention of Natural Freedom League is to expand the understanding of natural law, which is based on objective morality, and to expose the illegitimacy of the belief in authority, and thus the inherent immorality of all government.
We be the Natural Freedom League, cause we become no longer unvegan. We seek in the wisdom, and that's why we did come to this prison of prism. And that's why the beat thumps, and that's why we speak up. We be the Natural Freedom League, cause we become no longer unvegan. We seek in the wisdom, and that's why we did come to this prison of prism. And that's why the beat thumps, and that's why we speak up. We be the
Hello, everybody. Welcome once again to Natural Freedom League. You can find us always at naturalfreedomleague.com. And I am John Rowland, here once again with my producer and co-host, Chill Will Keller. What's up, Will?
What's up, my brother? We're back in the saddle, man. It's good to do an episode, first one of the year.
Yeah, I gotta get comfortable again, you know?
We be the.
Yeah. I know, I was bumping to it. It's going to make it a lot easier coming back with our good friend and our special guest, Logan Hart. How you doing, Logan?
I'm fantastic, gentlemen. Thank you for having me on.
Welcome, brother. Welcome.
Yeah, this is episode 76, and we're kind of officially calling this season 3. We started in 2020. And 75 episodes under our belt, and looking forward to getting back to talking to people, as well as Will and I just kind of brainstorming and, you know, going down rabbit holes and trying to understand what all this craziness is about in this beautiful world. First off, I'd like to catch up with Logan and kind of have you tell us what's new with the Wizard Factory. We've seen you doing really good work. I told you that I just watched your episode with Thomas Sheridan. I thought it was excellent. And so why don't you tell us what you have going on with the Wizard Factory?
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. It feels good to be doing content again. Those who know, I took a bit of hiatus over a year, actually, after the ex-business partner and co-founder left. I took my time and decided to continue on as a solo project. So that's been, I don't know, about 6 months or more. It's been a good little bit, and I'm feeling like I got some good momentum. Really happy with all the content, covering a lot of diverse topics as we do. And that one with Sheridan was definitely a really good one too.
Yeah, this year I feel like, I don't know why, I'm drawn to the idea of magic and, just using, building up my energy and my power and manifesting. And so I've been reading, starting this year off, reading a lot of books about magic. So I wanted to hear another point of view on it. And it was an excellent perspective and another good place to jump off if you want to get into the topic. So anybody out there listening, definitely recommend checking out that episode and then also checking out the rest of Logan's work. Will, why don't you tell us a little bit about what we're going to be talking about today?
Excellent. Yeah, this topic is very dear to my heart. The title is called Animism. And this is a vast topic. We can do episodes, tons of episodes on this topic. But I think it's really important, that people have a general understanding of what animism is. There's a lot of disinfo. There's a lot of incorrect perceptions on what animism is. So we're going to kind of break the foundation and dive into what is it? What does it mean? How can it be useful in today's world? And I'm really excited. Logan has, several episodes actually on this topic that I highly recommend people go back through past episodes and check out. So I guess we should jump it off with definitions. Logan, do you want to define the word animism?
Sure. So obviously it comes from anima, which is, I believe it's Greek or Latin. I'm not sure which. But essentially, there's kind of multiple meanings to it. It means, like life force, life force energy. It also means breath as well, which I find very interesting. Your spirituality is connected to your respiration, your breath. That is your life forces. The ins and outs, the cyclic flow. Essentially, like when you draw your last breath, that is the kind of iconic end of your existence, your incarnation. So I think that's a really beautiful kind of dual meaning, because it really takes things way past the materialistic perspective and looking into, you know even breath itself. Is it just air going in and out? That's such a simplistic perspective. It's so much more than that. To be a living, breathing being that is animated with that life force energy, there you get again, you have that word. And so it's really a fairly simple concept to understand, but it's so central. It affects everything. And so, like, it's become very central and fundamental to my spiritual perspective. And I know you as well, Will. And John, you've been telling me how, like, you're newer to it, but you're really intrigued by it, and you're really trying to, like, dive into that. So that's good stuff.
Yeah, I was telling Will when I saw his presentation. It's one of those things where, I mean, I know the term, I've heard the term, and I I have the same perspective as both of you guys on it. It's just I don't necessarily use that term for it. But when I saw Will's presentation for the was that for the funnel too,
Funnel
Will?
two.
Or you end up doing it at the you had the technical difficulty, so you did it at
Correct.
the
Yeah.
dissolving the illusions, but
Shattering the Illusion Conference.
shattering the illusions. That's right. Yeah, I've been working on this idea of the natural universal spirit. That natural law is the way that the world functions. It's sort of describing the way that this thing functions, but the natural universal spirit, I'm basically making it into an entity. I'm looking at it as this is this living entity that we are a part of, and it's running through everything. And it's the breath. I mean, it's so basic that you breathe it in, it gives you life, but yet we detach from it, and we think of it as this material perspective. So I'm kind of rambling a little bit, but Will, why don't you get into your definition?
Yeah, no, Logan did a great job, and I find it interesting when I talk to people about animism. A lot of people actually can relate to it. They go, "Oh, well, I have that same worldview," and they can relate to some of the aspects. So I think we're going to find that tonight with some of the viewers, and ultimately, it's not only a way of life; it's also a worldview. It's a perception. It's how you view the world. It's understanding the natural world and the self as well. I do agree that it's synonymous with paganism. I personally like the term animism because it's very descriptive, and paganism comes with sometimes some cultural religion baggage. And even the definition of pagan is just country dweller, which is someone that's just outside of the Abrahamic religions. This is not something that animists or pagans called themselves. It was a label that was given to them, which is important to understand. So this worldview, in my opinion, if we look at just religion, the definition of religion, you have two contexts. You have relegare, which means to bind and to hold back, to thwart from forward progress. But there's also another connotation of religio, which means to tie together, to reunite. I feel animism is that reconnection, that tying together. Why? And some people might, oh, okay, so now you have a new outlook that is the correct one. Yeah, but animism is based in the natural world. It's based in truth. It's seeking the truth discovery and understanding oneself and the natural world, the forces of the natural world, which correlate to the psyche, to psychology. So it's very much different. They're opposite polarities. And there's a reason when you dive into history why pagans and animists were killed, why genocide and murder happened in all cultures around the world, and that's because to sever this understanding, this knowledge, this gnosis of the natural world, to take control in a sense. So
Yeah, I've got,
yeah.
yeah, I definitely have some things that I can comment there. So you were talking about the reconnection, that
Mm.
aspect of religion that is to bind. That's the negative, and then to sort of reconnect. And you have to look at the trajectory where we're at, humanity in this modern age. In a world gone wrong, you have to take some steps backwards sometimes to get back to the correct path and get reconnected to nature. Because if you're disconnected from nature, you are disconnected from your evolution, from your spirituality. I mean, you cannot have those things and be disconnected from nature. And so, to me, really what it comes down to is it's the most simple and pure perspective. It's like when you remove all of the dogma and the indoctrination of religion and culture and all of that. Animism is just such a pure and simple, direct, viewpoint on. I was going through my content notes from a while back, and I just happened to see this today, and I thought it was fitting that animism is the only religion that isn't one, because there's no belief required. There's no doctrine. It's based purely on observation. This is where all true religions actually came from. They didn't come from a book. They didn't come from a priest. They came from observing nature and seeing, wait a minute, there's these grand patterns that emerge when you're really paying attention from your higher awareness. You could see the connectedness of all things. And animism truly is just the recognition of that oneness, that all energy is but borrowed from the all. Like we borrow it through our physical vessels for a short time while we're here, and then we're recycled. And so it's like, what are you going to do with that? How are you going to use that gift?
Man, well said, dude. Absolutely. It's very much proactive. There's engagement. That's why I was saying it's a lifestyle as well. And I really love what you said about observation, because what's more foundational, if we think about our ancestors, right? There's no TV, there's no social media. They observed and they interacted with the natural world. And in my opinion, our ancestors in the distant path were very much further along in the evolution process in consciousness than we are now. I think we're moving backwards for sure, or in that downward spiral of involution, devolving. So it's really fascinating. And that's why it's twofold for me. It's a way of being and a worldview. Connecting those dots, having the pattern recognition of the natural world and the self, that it's one and the same, that ultimately nature, we are not separate, we are a part of nature. It's one big system. And looking at the world from levels of consciousness and energy gives you profound insight.
I'd like to read the definition from Wikipedia. Wikipedia is sort of the zeitgeist of the mainstream thought. This is kind of a good place to start when you're going down these rabbit holes. And Logan, I'd like you to comment after I read this paragraph on your thoughts on this. Animism, from Latin, anima meaning breath, spirit, life, is the belief that objects, places, and creatures all possess a distinct spiritual essence. Potentially, animism perceives all things, animals, plants, rocks, rivers, weather systems, human handiwork, and perhaps even words, as animated and alive. Animism is used in anthropology of religion as a term for the belief system of many indigenous peoples, aka pagans. I'm adding that in there. especially in contrast to the relatively more recent development of organized religions. Animism focuses on the metaphysical universe with a specific focus on the concept of the immaterial soul.
Can't knock it. It's pretty
Hmm.
decent, actually. Um, I love it mentions that, that there's this consciousness, this spiritual essence of all things. And what it didn't say that I would add to is this is truly kind of the essence of the animist perspective, is that it's everything is consciousness. It's kind of tying into hermetic philosophy. All is mind. This is it's all conscious energy, and in matter is existing within this mind realm of God, or whatever you want to call it. So it's all consciousness, but in various degrees, which is also another hermetic principle. Polarity, everything is the same but only varying through degree. I would say consciousness is the spectrum of all spectrums, because it's like, um, everything is something, just how much of something, basically. And so yeah, it's through these complex patterns, it's through these laws of nature, and through thousands and millions of years of these processes happening over and over, it molds and shapes matter into higher conscious forms, and you have these emergent properties that come out. So consciousness is aware, or present in all things, even from a rock to a tree, and you can see that there's these energies, these patterns to them. But then when you get into life, that's kind of the highest tier of this spectrum of consciousness. And then even within life, there's a spectrum of consciousness, from single-celled organisms, a worm, a serpent, a mammal, and then human beings. Here we are, all at the tippy top, the kings of the forest, and all that kind of stuff. Hubris aside, we do have a great capacity for both great awareness and great ignorance. It's really up to each individual how they're wielding, how they're being responsible for that consciousness. Because like with anything, I could give you the greatest gift on earth, and you could just throw it down in the mud if you chose to. But that's your prerogative, and you'd be responsible for that choice.
Yeah,
What are your
man.
thoughts on the way that it says human handiwork and perhaps even words,
What was the context of that?
in terms of that being also animism? I mean, I feel like we tend to look at ourselves as separate from nature, and that
Mhm.
the things that we create are not, don't contain spirit or are somehow separate from nature. And this is including that even human handiwork and words also have, you can apply animism to those as well.
I would say that's true, but it's not by our genius invention by any means. All genius inventions come from nature, and we just find a way to replicate stuff, whether it's a helicopter, or using our vocal cords to mimic sounds we hear, whatever it is. Just even looking at something like gender, for example, you hear this a lot nowadays, that gender is this human construct. We came up with these roles or whatever. This just shows how disconnected we are from nature, that you can't observe that man and woman, not just in flesh and biology, but in energy and essence, are fundamentally different. And these things are not human. These are cosmic forces present everywhere you look. If you know how to find, extrapolate those higher um, patterns, as we said. I mean, this is true intelligence. It's not just the intellect of being critical, and just seeing like the mechanical clockwork of the universe. It's also being able to see the essence of it, and seeing the forest for the trees, basically.
Mm. Yeah, exactly. I mean, and even when it's interesting, it said What did it say? Human handiwork? Or
Hmm.
yeah, and being a construction worker, that's usually like craftsmanship, right? Making, a bench or something like that. But we have to remember that everything is derives from the elements as well, right? Even if you're making a plane, it's coming from some type of elements that are put together, and there's energy that is put in that as well from human beings. But yeah, Logan nailed it. It's good to understand when we use a term like animism or paganism that it comes with baggage. This baggage is deliberate, and this is done by the cultural religions, Christianity mainly, Judaism, Islam, all of these programming conditions and conditioning. It wants these terms to give you the impression that it's primitive, that it's from primitive people, back in the day. And even indigenous people, they're forest people, they're not capable of having the high intellect like human beings have today, which is, absolutely, it's just erroneous. It's not true. We can look at indigenous cultures nowadays that are animists, right? And mental illness is almost unheard of, right? They totally understand how the natural world works. You have a catastrophe, a global catastrophe, those type of people will be the only people standing, right? Because they understand natural law, the laws of nature. So first things first is almost deprogramming yourself on what you believe, what you think something is. I think the New Age movement has high potential for understanding animism because they have a heavy emphasis on consciousness and energy, and so they can see the correlations, but yet there's that field or that shell of Christianity that still haunts the New Age movement, that programming and conditioning, which is just like new package Christianity. So when we're talking about, it's good to talk about the cultural religions versus animism, because that's what it is. It has a huge effect on the history of animism and what it is today, and how it's talked about as well. Would you agree with that, Logan?
100%. I mean, you definitely, you said a couple things too that really inspired some new ideas about these. I'm seeing this theme kind of emerge throughout this discussion that's really beautiful of this borrowed energy kind of thing, or even borrowed awareness. So I had mentioned earlier. The very energy that is animating our bodies, but even any form of creativity, you can look at. I mean, when you make a song, right? What are you creating something, or are you manipulating matter and playing within the same 12 notes that have ever existed within
Mm.
all of history, right? You're combining ingredients, right? If you're a chef, you're not creating a dish, you're combining what already is there from the spices and the plants and herbs and all that kind of stuff. And then you mentioned construction will, like if you're creating a building, well, you still have to go out and get all of these natural resources, your wood and your stone, and put that all together. So we might think that it's all of our handiwork, but essentially you got to keep the first thing, which is nature. Everything comes from nature. We're capable of beautiful and tremendous things, but only because nature allows it. And I mean, that's where it's important to kind of keep our ego in check, and just kind of be humble in the sheer majesty and power and true authority of nature.
Mm. Absolutely, for
It
sure.
reminds me of Taoism, where it's doing by not doing, but it actually means that you're doing it in a way where you are becoming the act. You are embodying it instead of looking at yourself as separate from this act that you're doing. And in this definition, the part, the human handiwork, I always find interesting because of, again, like the way that we consider ourselves artificial. Like artificial really just means man-made, right? It means man has manipulated nature and creation in such a way that now we look at it as artificial. It's separate from the actual nature. I guess this would imply that maybe you should look at it as it's also a part of that nature. And then when he said the definition says the words, it made me think of your interview with Thomas Sheridan and just, the practice of magic, and that these words can become almost like living entities, an egregore, right? Like even like Natural Freedom League or the Wizard Factory, it becomes this animated thing in its own.
Yeah, you're imbuing it with that energy, that conscious, awareness. And I mean, Terrence McKenna talked a lot about the power of words that literally shape and mold not only reality, but is largely connected from culture, and kind of like that. It can be a bit of a prison for your mind. Is the words that you're told to use or are proper or whatever, especially if you're not looking at the true meanings via the etymology, but just at the cultural sense of words. They can be kind of an energetic trap because you're not being conscious of them, but they still have a lot of power there. And another thing that dawned on me too, that's connected to all of this, in context to the borrowing of ideas. Of course, so like the gods, for example, these aren't man-made constructs either. You were talking, Will, earlier about how the academics, they always want to try to paint everything in this light of like that was then, everything was very primitive, and now we've evolved, and now we have Christianity and Western culture and all this kind of stuff, but they were just very primitive, and so they invented these deities to explain natural forces because they didn't understand. No, like it wasn't some make-up concept to try to explain phenomena that they didn't understand. It's again totally reverse thinking. Sorry, I'm trying to get my camera to focus. It's it does this sometimes. Oh, there we go. Okay, hello. It wasn't to try to explain something they didn't understand. It was to create a anthropomorphized concept to represent. It wasn't to explain. It was to represent, to make things easier to kind of refer to understand, like to conceptualize things that were happening. It wasn't. I don't think they believed it was like literally this dude up, like banging on his anvil and stuff like that, creating thunder. It was a way to create an entity to work with and conceptualize this cosmic force that's not just literal thunder. It's the electromagnetic force of the universe, its boundaries. This is what Thor truly means. Mm-hmm. It's also connected to Jupiter as well. But to finish up, what I was going to say is even religions can't do anything original. They had to steal all their ideas from pagan and animist concepts as well, because that's where truth comes from. So they couldn't make their own thing. They just had to try to hijack and then twist and distort and pervert, that divine truth.
Yeah, man, that's so profound. I mean, anyone that identifies with the cultural religions, like, this is a path that you should go down and understand, like exactly what Logan is talking about. Nature is truth. Now, if we look at the animists and the pagan traditions, all of our ancestors at one point were animists, right? If we look at these, it was all oral tradition. It really wasn't until, and sure, there's runes and hieroglyphs and symbols which have huge impact, but it wasn't until really the cultural religions came and stepped in where writing really became at the forefront. And the problem with that is when you have an oral tradition, you're speaking words. So not only are you getting the story, which, what better way to explain natural forces, just the cosmic environment, right? To make it a story, that can be passed down from generation to generation, with meaning and purpose within that story. So it makes it timeless. But when the cultural religions stepped in and they started writing stuff down, they used this to their advantage. So all the holy books, the scriptures, right? This is what it is. It is not literal at all. It is astrotheology. It's archetypal. It's allegory. So they have taken stories, the method of storytelling, and they've turned it into scripture to use it for a purpose, really, because then they anthropomorphize the deities and make them human, which really is promoting ego dominance, right? That human beings are the apex of creation, not nature, and it creates the belief in authority is what it ultimately creates. It's a hierarchy, meaning that if you want to be spiritual, if you want to commune with quote unquote God, the creator, you have to go through a rabbi or a priest, etc. You have to go by their means. So it's really important to understand that astrotheology, allegorical and archetypal. The archetypes were, this is what the gods and goddesses were. They were archetypes. They were characteristics of our own psychology that's also recognized and represented in the forces of nature. This is why they represent the planets as well, and elements
As
as
above,
well,
so
right?
below.
Exactly. The law of correspondence. So it's really empowering to dive down this path and decode. This is what separates us from, the animal kingdom, the plant and minerals, that we have this great capacity for technology, logi, which is the craft of logic, creating a craft of logic and reason for us to understand and decode the information that's all around us in this field of consciousness that's constantly communicating with us. It's
Very
really
well said.
empowering.
Very well said.
New nickname for Logan, Technologi.
Technology.
I'll take it.
Or just
Great.
look at astrology, astrology, right? Astrology, which is
Yes.
cosmic logic.
Right, the study of.
The study of, exactly.
And definitely that's another way that I would actually define or explain paganism or animism, is the art of learning to see everything as allegorical, right? Like, we use it all the time in our regular day-to-day language, and we don't, most of the time we're not even conscious of it. But when you're looking for the light at the end of the tunnel if you're going through a hard time, well, that's not literal. There's no light. There's no tunnel. You're not in a tunnel. But it's allegorical, and yet people can connect with that and they understand that. But somehow paganism and animism, that's this other weird fringy thing over here. But we're doing it all the time because that's the way the brain is wired. It's one thing to try to pontificate these cosmic universal truths very literally, and like, thou shalt not steal, there you go, there's the 10 commandments right there. Let's just say it, very left brain, logically, plainly, like that, and making these demands, versus the way we actually learn is through experience. And what does religion do but try to cut you off from your experience? Well, you don't need to, you just need faith, right? You don't need to experience it for yourself. It's true because this book says it's true. Trust that instead of your own experience. And so this is how our brains, and they knew this, and that's why they constructed these traditions around the art of storytelling and allegory. Because instead of saying, don't do this or something bad will happen, you can tell a story about this boy that went and did this thing, and this was the outcome. That's natural law in a nutshell. This is what happened, and this was the outcome. This was the consequence of the choices that this person made. And somehow we really internalize and understand that so much better than just saying it outright. And that's really all it is they understood that this is how we're wired. And like you said, Will, it's much easier to pass that story down. And we just connect to stories as human beings. I mean, this is what any marketer or entertainer will tell you, is if you're crafting stories, and that's how you sell things, that's how you create an experience, whether you're like an online business or whatever, it doesn't matter. That's what we understand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely, man. Well said. And it's interesting too, as an animist, and a lot of people have animist qualities, right? I mean, do you own a pet? I bet you own a pet and you think your pet is family. You see the unique personality of your pet. If you have a garden, right, or a house plant, people can see they can see the energy from their houseplant. It comes like a part of their family, and pets as well. Same thing with just the natural world, other animals and plants and stuff like that. This is where pagans and animists, they really were connected with the natural world. They see oak tree as almost like a personality type, which is really just a type of energy, and they're able to read the psychic weather and do all this stuff. I mean, that's advanced consciousness, if you ask me. Sure, they don't have helicopters flying around in the sky, which, this is on the opposite side of the polarity, but they have a deep understanding of vibration and energy. So it's something I think that people do a lot. They just haven't recognized it, right? It's like they interact with their pets and things in their own personal life, but forget to extend it to the outside world.
And speak in metaphors.
Yes, exactly.
What I've found interesting with just reaching in, or researching into this term, is the guy who coined the term was a man in 1871 named Edward Tyler. But it sounds like, from your guys' perspective, that word has been adopted in a positive sense. He used it it basically was the earliest concept of anthropology, where he was using it to define these cultures that applied animism to, or applied a spiritual or a soul to living, or to all things, even rocks and rivers and things like that. But his idea was that eventually we would move beyond even the cultural religions. And so it's just interesting how we embrace the term and we call ourselves animists, but when this man described it, it was actually seemingly to be an attempt to separate it from the cultural religions, and define what the ancients did. And basically, it appears to be an attempt to remove the spirit, actually, to remove any connection from nature. So I think the one thing I think that you guys are both saying that's really important is just the awareness of, when you're reading any of the cultural religions, there is that perspective embedded in it, that you can look at it as an allegory and you can understand these deeper truths, but it also seems to be used as a tool to control a large portion of people. So I wonder, is it a tool to weed out the people that have discernment versus the people that don't?
For me, I think it's depending on which text or which stories you're talking about, but largely, I think, growing up Christian, that's the one I have the most knowledge of. I think, just as you can use stories to teach good lessons and good morals, you can also use them to lead people astray, and and tell, like, what how obedience and fear of God will be rewarded in the afterlife and all this. So be like Johnny, that kind of thing. That's kind of how I see it.
Do you think that they created religion as a way to encode these spiritual concepts, to, like you said, to sort of market it to people? Or, do you think it was just, I mean, I guess we can't really know, it's all assumption, but was it just a way to control the masses? Because, I follow a lot of content creators who look at Christianity from a totally allegorical perspective, and I just find way more meaning in the story when you look at it that way. But yet when you are dealing with people who take it literally, it seems to be a hindrance to our development and our spiritual development. That's for
I'll
both of you, whatever you guys
yeah,
think.
Will, I'll let you get this one. I've got
for
stuff
sure.
too, but
Absolutely, I'll jump on this. And again, I think it's yes and no. You have to understand, especially with Christianity, right? I mean, the New Testament was written by Saint Paul, and Constantine took that over as well and used it for to get the pagans. Which, by the way, Constantine, he was a pagan and he died a pagan, but he used Christianity, this new religion, and he used it to sway the pagans into the new control system. So think about the book, the Bible, for instance, right? It has a whole bunch of truths in it, but it also has some really hardcore deception. So it's using these archetypes and these allegories and the astrotheology that hits in the subconscious mind. This is what makes it timeless. This is what makes people, even looking at it from the exoteric, the outer shell, right? They still vibe with it, and they can latch on because they somewhat unconsciously or in the subconsciously, they identify with it. This is just like the hero story, the white knight, the hero archetype. Everyone loves this archetype, right? This is the masculine animus. We all have this within us, and this is what, ultimately we want to be. We want to activate this hero. This is why they use it in movies as well, because it resonates with the psyche of human beings. Same thing with the cultural religions. So ultimately, yes, used for control for sure, but that does not mean that you cannot understand it and use it as a pathway of self-development. But I would say, proceed with caution, because you really have to be grounded. And I would say, get somewhat versed on multiple traditions, right? Because you can do something like Judaism, where it's really based on a stellar cult astrotheology. It's heavily influenced on that, on the stars, the not the lesser stars, but like the planets and stuff like that. But I mean, even Christianity has this too. The 12 disciples, the 12, the zodiac. It's still a solar. It's ultimately the story of the sun, because the sun is the soul. This is the masculine principle. So
That's what I mean. So it's obviously so a lot of this discussion came up over the holidays, right? The story of Jesus is obviously the story of the Son, right? Like the Son of God, right? It's like all of the pattern recognition is there. The Son, it dies for 3 days and then it is born again. And why do some people, they're not able to see that? And but then again, why did the people who wrote it, if they were just using it for control, why did they encode that knowledge in there? It to me, it seems like they're putting it there for the people who have the eyes to see, and for the ones who don't, then they're the ones that are going to be NPCs or whatever you want to call it. But then even with that, I follow this guy. I follow Marty Leeds. I'm sure you guys have heard of Marty Leeds. He considers himself a Gnostic, right? But it's like, why does he feel the need to still call it the Christ, Jesus Christ? And it's like, why don't we just say it's the Son?
Exactly.
Like I feel like the Native Americans, especially, they would like, okay, this is the spirit of the wolf. This is the spirit of the bear. There's the Great Spirit, which is the whole thing. But then they actually called it what it was, and I see people, like Gnostics, who they still use the Bible and that idea that it's like, the Jesus Christ, and they use that terminology, even though they know clearly that this is talking about the cycle of nature. So
It's multiple folds, right? I mean, it is like looking at the Bible, it is a powerful occult book, because you're right. If you have the eyes to see, then you can see the allegory, you can see the astrotheology, you can see the gaslighting that's in there as well, right? I mean, if you compare Odin with Jesus, right, the gaslighting is that, well, Jesus sacrificed himself for your sins. So, and then you look at Odin, where there was self-sacrifice to attain knowledge of self. So there's two different realms going on there. It's, you know, astrotheology, it's archetypal, it's allegorical, but also used for control as well. Mainly because, of course, just like the social engineers nowadays, they kind of, if you have the eyes to see, then you can see through the bullshit. Same thing with the Bible as well. When the Bible was coming out, even the New Testament, you have to understand that they were trying to get, you know, millions of people into this new religion, and it wasn't like they were just repping, hey, we got the newest trend. They did it by force first, and they did it through genocide. And then, you know, it's a long game. It takes just generations and people mass conversion and that kind of stuff. So yeah, I had
I would
something else
even
I was going to say. I forgot, but go on.
yeah, I got lots to spit on this one, man. I would even say, like off the last thing you said too, there's probably a lot of trauma bonding going
Mm,
on with this religion here because it was propagated by the sword. That's going to create like this almost Stockholm syndrome type of attachment to that ideology. But to answer the question in the broader sense, I definitely see it as there's multiple levels to it as far as the control. The what its original purpose was. Of course, we can only speculate. I don't really know. It was written by a bunch of different people. Maybe they all had different kind of motives, and some of them were pretty nefarious, and other ones were really trying to enlighten, but through allegorical, teachings or whatever. That seems like the most reasonable, is that it's a little bit of all that, right? Usually things nuanced like that, but in terms of its current form and the way it was uh, aggregated and then used as a mind control weapon, to me there's no mistaking that when that turning point happened and it was used to systematically eradicate animistic cultures abroad. um, you know it was like we said, more of a hijacking of these concepts that they know that the psyche responds to these primordial archetypes and symbols and stories that we relate to on a subconscious level. So even if we're not aware, even if we're not in the know and hip to like the esoteric things, it's connecting with us on a very subconscious level, and that's the mind control part of it. And of course, the average person doesn't have the discernment or the knowledge to tell what's what and what to. I mean, there are profound truths within, and there's also, like you said, Will, horrible gaslighting and absolutely barbaric, violent, just loathsome, things that are kind of normalized, and people will say, oh well, that was just the times were different and stuff like that. Well, as we all know, as studiers of natural law, that morality doesn't change based on what year it is. So how can you say that like that's a legitimate justification for it?
mm,
But at the end of the day, personally, to each their own. And that's kind of part of the thing about being a pagan is, you know what, you do you. I don't have any right to say what you do. That's your path to walk. But for me, I can speak my mind, and I don't resonate with the Gnostic view. Anything to do with that I just think what I call the poison chalice. It's like, sure, you can work up your immunity and where you can stomach the poison, but why not just find a better source? You know what I mean? There's far more pure cups to drink from, and that's my take on it, is that like, just why bother? It's so riddled with booby traps. You can, and I see the traditions such as Norse paganism, which is what I more study and practice. And I do think there's something to connecting with your direct bloodline lineage, your ancestral connection there. I think this goes beyond just intellectualization. There's a very energetic connection to these traditions based on your actual blood and your DNA. But I just see that, taking that approach is just a lot more pure and direct. And as we said, connected to nature. Because I remember, my being raised very conservative Christian, and my mom and my aunt and other family members would talk about paganism and how it was evil because they were worshiping the creation instead of the creator. And that just goes, I mean, that says it all right there, that they believe that there is any difference, that there is an actual separation between creation and creator. It's all the same thing. And this is the essence of what we're talking about here. So that's perfectly, uh, demonstrative of the issue with these, what I call mind viruses.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's almost like removing the middleman when you deprogram
Yes.
yourself from cultural religion and all types of cultural religion, right? You're removing the middleman because guess what? Communing with creator is it's you and experience and living. It's all around you, right? The natural world, nature, the living Bible is all around you. You don't need a material book that is man-made to explain this, because ultimately what it's doing is it's severing your connection with nature. Not truly severing, but it's your conscious awareness that you're not utilizing, and then you're looking towards the material realm. A lot of things that we do today in this modern day is still monotheistic. I mean, here's an example that's very traumatic: is circumcision, right? This is a religion ritual. This is what it's part of. So, and then how I was talking about the New Age movement, which is repackaged Christianity. Christ consciousness is really big in the New Age movement. Now, if you're speaking of the allegory of just higher awareness and becoming a moral human being, sure, I agree with that. But it still has overtones of or overlap of the cultural religions. The savior complex is huge nowadays. Look at, people are looking at Q and all these human beings that are going to come and save the day. Where does that come from? That quality comes from cultural religions, just passed down. So we have these programs that are playing out in our psyche with a lot of people, when in reality, the relationship that we are develop within our own lives, our own psyche, our emotional, our internal ecology, and the natural world, our actions, this is where we can actually develop and gain true experience.
So I have a question for you, Logan. So you talk about the Norse tradition, but isn't that considered anthropomorphism as well?
Yeah.
But do you think it's different than the other cultural religions? How do you see it as separate, or more related to animism than, say, Christianity or any of the Abrahamic religions?
That's a great question. So for me, I see these beings, these deities, as they have very human qualities. They're a lot more relatable as teachers, and you shouldn't just necessarily see them, put them on pedestals. That's a very Christian thing of, like, deifying, like, elevating them. Sure, they're these celestial beings. They're like higher than humans, but they, for example, the gods are seeking human knowledge as well. Like, they're spiritual beings still, as opposed to Yahweh, that's just like perfect and flawless and just casting judgment on everyone. The Norse gods, they're very spiritual beings. They're going on their own journeys and adventures, and they make mistakes, and like, it's just a totally different dynamic. But again, I still see them as more archetypal than actual. most people aren't looking at Yahweh and even Jesus as archetypal, you know, aspects to work with. That's one of the key distinctions that I would make. Is it's not literal, and it's reflective of cosmic natural energies as well as aspects of ourselves. We all have Odin, Thor, Loki, Freya, all within us.
I really like what you said about, getting in touch with your ancestral lineage. And here's the thing. It's like, it doesn't matter if it's African, if Aboriginal, if you're from, if it's Native Americans, you can go back and get in touch. You're going to see, guess what? You're going to see the correspondences within all
Parallels.
the parallels, and all over the world. They are there. And that's a beautiful thing for sure.
Yeah, I think it's good to have a eclectic understanding and study these different, because it kind of corroborates this as well, of like, how did all these cultures that weren't really that directly connected in terms of like sharing. I mean, there's some connections if you go further back from like the Indo-Europeans and into the Hindu, and there's some common connections there. But then you go to like South America, or like, I don't know. There's just something to the fact that you can study all these different aspects and see the parallels when they weren't just like all going to these conventions and sharing notes or anything like that. Like, they were all deriving these awarenesses, these concepts and archetypes from direct connection with nature. And they might have had different names to call it, maybe some slightly different attributes here and there. But for the most part, it's unmistakable that there's a ton of correlation there.
Yeah, like all the Greek gods and the Egyptian gods,
Yeah.
there's parallels there. There's however many gods, and the Egyptian religion, there's the same for the Greeks, there's the same for the Norse. So yeah, that's interesting. I'm going to define anthropomorphism. Anthropomorphism is the attribution of human traits, emotions, or intentions to non-human entities. It is considered to be an innate tendency of human psychology. This again is from Wikipedia. Do you agree that it is an innate tendency of human psychology to do that? And do you think that we need to, are we working on moving past that?
Kind of, but it's almost like they're trying to frame it in this way of just like, oh, it's just what these silly humans do. you know um is a man being masculine an innate tendency? Well, yeah, but does that make masculinity inherently human, or are we reflecting a higher aspect?
Mm. Mm. Yeah, there you go.
Well, getting on that, why don't we talk a little bit about the anima and the animus? And Will, I'll pass that to you.
Yeah, I love it. So these are the anima and the animus. Carl Jung has did some profound work on this, right? These are um, aspects of our psychology. We can Most people understand the subconscious, the shadow, right? Where the shadow is responsible for getting your attention on the falsities that you're experiencing in your psyche, in life, right? So when you bury trauma and insecurities, the shadow comes out in behavior to get your attention. This is the problem nowadays. Most people don't have that inner awareness, and they aren't doing the healing that's involved. So they end up they have incorrect thinking and incorrect actions. Now, going past the shadow, going deeper, you get to the anima and the animus. You can look at this as the feminine and the masculine, right? The feminine being the anima and the masculine being the animus. It's also directly related to mother and father from our childhood. So, in the formative years, our relationship with mom, that's going to set the tone for our anima. And this is how, my relationship with my mother is going to have a heavy influence on how I interact with women and my romantic relationships in my life. So it's got, big overtones in that aspect as well. but it also represents something. The anima being the feminine or the mother aspect, right, is care, is the healer, is awe-inspiring, creativity, right? These are the characteristics of the anima. The animus, or the masculine or the father characteristic, it is the action, warrior, generating, but externally, creating energy, moving energy. I mean, excuse me. So these
Projection.
aspects,
Yeah.
yes, exactly. Yep, for sure. So what's important about understanding this is understanding your own psychology and the anima and the animus for obviously healing, right? Healing means whole. But if we look at the world today and how people are, they don't care, and they're supporting and condoning violent ideologies. This is from a fractured psyche, a fractured psyche of the anima or the animus, depending if you're biological male or female. And Carl Jung labeled this as anima or animus possession, which just really means that it has married the shadow and it's coming out in behavior, and you're not even aware of it. So the anima, just like we start our journey from mom, from the female, this is the anima. This is where it starts, because the anima represents care and healing. So what happens when we have all this built up inner shame, which shame means the hate and the harm we've done to ourselves, not guilt. Guilt is, hurt and harm we've done to others. When we have this inner shame that we're not dealing with, this fractures the psyche, and it comes out as apathy, being apathetic, looking for control, which lets people identify with, government and these authority, the institutions and stuff like that. This is why Big Pharma is so successful. Why? Because usually when you have something wrong, even if it's psychological, you're not going to feel well. Where do you go? Most people go to the doctor. And this is where Western medicine steps in. And guess what? This is why the majority of people are on some kind of psychotropics or some kind of pharmaceuticals to numb that. So it's really it's suppressing the feminine, which that first step of healing is where we need the care, we need that healer, we need that mother, that feminine aspect of the anima. The animus is the action. Once you heal, then now you have the action to put out into the world. It's also the protector. So as men, guess what? You have a fractured animus, right? Or excuse me, it works opposite gender. So when you have a fractured anima, right, then you are feminized. You're not going to be the protector. You're not going to step up and say something when you see injustice or take action within your life. It's really deep. I could ramble too much on it, but it has. This is all in the same category of animism, right? Because your psychology, your internal ecology is one and the same. It correlates with nature on the macrocosm. This is why, astrology is so impactful once you have a deep understanding of it, because you're looking at the stars above and the planets, but they correlate to aspects of your psychology.
It's a roadmap to human consciousness.
Boom.
Absolutely.
Well said.
Yeah.
Well said.
And seeing that anima and animus is also, you're seeing, this this correspondence aspect as well. Like, we have the masculine and feminine within us. It's just a matter of how integrated you are. Like you said, healing means to be whole. So what are you separate from? You're separated from yourself. You're also separated from nature. This is why mental illness is this disconnection from nature, because it's disconnection from truth. They're one and the same. Mm. So, and that's why you can't heal without truth. You've got to stop lying to yourself and telling yourself these stories of victimhood and, worthlessness or hopelessness or helplessness or whatever the garbage that you're telling yourself is. And that's said from love. I don't mean that to be, to tear anyone down. It's but that's where the word tough love comes from. love is an extension of truth. And so it may be painful, but sometimes that's necessary. When you're speaking from truth, you're speaking of through love. It might be harmful, but it's still necessary, just like a bitter medicine or putting the peroxide on a wound. It fucking stings, but it's good for you. It's healing you.
Mm.
And we've got to heal that internal wound, especially dealing with the masculine and feminine. That's a big area that I've been, working a lot on this past year with myself, and getting back into my masculine instincts, getting into the intelligence of my body, and reversing that mother and father wound.
And
Excellent.
yeah, I'm assuming that what we're seeing in society in terms of the transgender agenda is part of not dealing with these types of issues and not discussing these types of ideas of like the anima and the animus. Um, I'm going to turn again to Wikipedia for the definition. The anima and animus are described in Carl Jung's School of Analytical Psychology as part of his theory of the collective unconscious. Jung describes the animus as the unconscious masculine side of a woman and the anima as the unconscious feminine side of a man, each transcending the personal psyche.
Hmm. Exactly.
I would definitely say there's a relation to the trans thing is a one aspect of a bigger issue, but it's showing up in all sorts of ways. It's just as relevant in an emasculated man and a masculinized woman. It's still an inversion of polarity. It just shows up in all different sorts of ways, whether you have a body dysmorphia, but at the end of the day, we're talking about energies. So to be, a woman, it's biological, but it's more to do with the energy that you're embodying than it is putting makeup on and wearing a dress. You know what I'm saying? And that's almost like putting a band-aid on a deep wound of some kind, and trying to normalize it and just say, oh, it's fine. For the first, and again, this is more of that tough love. It's not hateful. It's actually an act of love to say you have to call sickness what it is. If you had a family member that's dying of cancer, you're not going to say, "Oh, you're fine. You don't need to do anything. You're just going to live the next 30 years just fine." No, you need to tell them, like, you're sick. You need to, eat healthier. You need to make some changes. You need to address this because you're not well. And you saying that from love. You're not saying that to make them feel bad, like, oh, you should be ashamed you have cancer. It's not anything like that. It's just you have to start with truth and being honest and coming from that place. You know,
Yeah.
a lot of
Exactly.
work.
I think it's interesting that in looking at this, the anthropomorphic keeps coming up. So the second sentence here, Jung's theory states that the anima and animus are the two primary anthropomorphic archetypes of the unconscious mind, as opposed to the theriomorphic, a word I've never heard before, theriomorphic and inferior function of the shadow archetypes. I think Will, you were talking about this. So the anima or the animus is not your shadow, right?
It's deeper. It's deeper than the shadow.
What is the shadow?
The shadow is the subconscious mind. So you can look at the anima and animus in a deeper layer, according to Carl Jung. So that's how and you can look at the anima and animus also as purpose and meaning as well on a macro level. So this we're talking about the principle of gender, and like Logan said, this is energetic qualities
Hmm. And animistic.
and animistic.
Right.
Exactly.
I mean, look at that. Like, it goes at a layer of your psychology deeper than your subconscious mind itself, is still a masculine and feminine aspect that needs integration. And you're telling me it's a human construct? I mean, get
Yeah.
out of here.
Yeah, exactly. Same with even the archetypes, right? I mean, archetypal work is done, and Carl Jung did a plethora of research on this. It really, the work is done through dreams, right? Because the subconscious mind really, it operates through images and symbols and just visual aspects. So we see these archetypes, these personality traits coming out into dreams. This is also why psychedelics and plant medicines are so impactful. It's because you can interact with these archetypes and do some integration afterwards as well. So it's really peeling back the layers from your persona. I think I am Will, the podcaster, right now, right? You're in the conscious mind and pulling it back to ultimately, the divine essence of oneself. And there's these layers of awareness. And this is where we're looking at, the shadow and the anima and animus. You do that by reflecting, like how we started this conversation off observation. Observe the patterns in your life, your thought patterns, emotional stability, and behaviors, physical behaviors. And then, apply introspection and think deeply upon this and how it relates to your childhood or any aspects of your life.
I think it's interesting too that the term comes from a guy who basically that became anthropology. So anthropology being the study of man, right? The study.
Correct.
So it's almost like if you take the Hermetic principle, as above, so below, as below, so above. It's almost like anthropology is starting at as below. It's like they're more focused on like just the below, like just what's going on within us, and they're sort of, and so that's where I see them. It seems like a sort of a pushback against the idea of spirit, right? It's saying that, like, I don't think Jung really thought this, but in a way it's saying that, well, these archetypes are all in our head, which technically they are, but if you take the Hermetic principle, it's starting with as the above, right? This thing, like, the creator, the creation outside of us, and then the archetype is how we interpret it. um, but I find that interesting, and I also find that interesting that then you go to Steiner, who created anthroposophy, which is the wisdom of man, right? And I think that was his attempt to bring the spirit back. If you look at Steiner's work, he's talking a lot about how we're in this material realm. And again, with Jung, I've seen a documentary on Jung where he talks a lot about the fall of man. I kind of think that this study of, oh, that's animism, that's this thing that these native people do, that's how religion got created. Eventually we'll move past religion, we won't need any beliefs. That is a very material idea, I see. And I see where Steiner, it makes sense that he would call it anthroposophy, because now he's trying to connect back to, like, man having wisdom and knowing that it's as above, so below. It's not just us, it's not going all just happening in our minds.
Yeah, that's very indicative of sort of the scientism mindset of seeing that, these old superstitions, right? Pagans and anthropology, anthropomorphizations, were a stepping stone to get us, they to where we are now. And now we've kind of like grown out of them. We've evolved past them. Whereas, and by doing so inadvertently, that's leaving the part behind that was uh, central to, well, not central, but inseparable from our evolution. It's like, I don't know, like using a car to get somewhere and then throwing the car away and thinking you're going to get another 1,000 miles without it. Like, it it's you it's all nature. It's you can't separate, and as soon as you do, you've lost your way. And then the further you get away from it, that's exactly how many miles it's going to take to get back on track, because you're
Yeah.
never going to get anywhere without it, basically.
Exactly, and in a lot of the mystery traditions, Hermeticism, they saw for instance, the pentagram, right? The star. This was all. It's also the Trevuvian man that Leonardo DiCaprio, not DiCaprio. Oh, something
Whoa.
just happened. We just had a glitch.
That was
Yeah,
a
I'm up.
glitch.
I'm up here now. I got
Okay,
I
there
got
we go.
promoted.
Anyways, my point being is that
Leonardo
it's
DiCaprio, right?
I Leonardo DiCaprio, exactly. We're talking about Titanic now. Here we go. No, but the Hermeticists, they saw the correspondences. I'll give you an example: the golden ratio, the Fibonacci sequence. That these numbers came up even within the human body and within astronomical equations, plants, everywhere in the natural world, they see this sequence happening. And this is also where the anthropomorphized aspect came from within the mystery traditions as well. Now that's obviously changed over the years, and I think it's more of a an egotism type of thing now. So
Well, another interesting thing is it says that the guy who came up with the term, Sir Edward Tylor, Tylor, had initially wanted to describe the phenomenon as spiritualism, but he realized that such would cause confusion with the modern religion of spiritualism. So at that time, you had this spiritual movement also rising with theosophy and those kind of ideas. And he was doing it from an anthropology, not anthropomorphic, an anthropological perspective, and he was again separating the spirit out. So I just think it's interesting that you see this push, and I think that's true with the Abrahamic religions as well, to eliminate spirit
mm,
from these texts, even though to me, I mean, I always saw the spirit in the Bible, and I always saw that side of the story. But again, it's clear that most people don't. Like with the comment you said, Logan, oh, you're worshiping the creation, not the creator, as if they're two separate things.
Yeah. And you get this general vibe even from the Gnostics that, matter is lower, it's not spiritual, it's low vibration, it's a prison, right? And spirit is up here, and that's where all the divinity is, not down here with we mere mortals.
mhm.
But again, like if you're looking at the Norse perspective, for example, Midgard is a spiritual realm. It's the one right in the center, and that's allowing for travel to all of the other spiritual realms.
Yeah.
Yeah, well said. This is the spiritual realm, right? It's one and the same. It's one big system, and definitely we see human beings want to separate that, and even with all the religions. That's why I like what you said earlier, Logan. That animism, paganism isn't a religion. There's no how to become pagan. Ultimately, right, there's no how-to book. It's
Mm-hmm.
understanding the concept, what it means, and you're going to have your own individual relationship with this as well.
Yeah, I call it spiritual anarchy because
Oh,
it's the
yes.
it's the absence of institutionalized, dogma and authority and all of that. It's the default. It's like if you just you know put a child into a room and didn't tell them anything, like tell them what to do, tell them what anything was, they're going to be pure in that natural wonderment of just exploring and having experiences. That's exactly what we're talking about here. Exploring the universe through nature, having experiences, and evolving through those experiences. I mean, that's what spirituality really is living your life, a sequence of experiences that hopefully by the end of it you're a lot more wiser and evolved than you were before.
Yeah, Will, the thing you were saying about people considering it a religion, it says largely due to such ethno linguistic and cultural discrepancies, opinions differ on whether animism refers to an ancestral mode of experience common to indigenous peoples around the world, or to a full-fledged religion in its own right. So yeah,
Well,
that's
depends on what you mean by religion. I mean, even that is such a loaded term,
right.
but
Yeah.
it's the
Exactly.
same reason. It's the same kind of idea of like Christianity and, well, what do you mean by Christ? Like, just miss me with all that. It's too much, Keep it simple, get back to the basics, and work from a better, more direct connection instead of sifting through all of that constantly. It's just so muddied up.
Well,
Yeah.
again, that's why we were really having this conversation, because I'm sitting there going, well, why isn't it okay to just worship the sun? Like, why wouldn't we worship the sun? Like, just in the same way you would worship a tree, or, worship. If you look up the definition of worship, it means something has worth, right? Like you believe it has worth, like,
Mm,
so it's like, yeah, like why is that wrong? When you see the people during the holidays, I would see a lot of people today saying, oh, this is Christmas is a pagan religion, and it's like, but it's based on the sun. Like, why are we calling that evil? So, I mean, that points to the negative effect of the Abrahamic religions, where you have people saying that, worshiping what the sun is doing, and having a celebration because the sun came back up from its lowest point, that's somehow satanic
right.
to Christian people.
But then practicing this tradition that's all based on that, we just call it different stuff. That's
Right.
that's okay. Yeah,
Right.
it's nonsense.
Yeah, like they were saying, well, his birthday wasn't really on the 25th of
Yeah,
December, but it's like, if you're going to give up that part of the story, you got to give up the whole story. Like, why do
yeah,
you think he has 12
Yeah.
disciples,
Mm.
yeah. Why December 25th if it's not even his birthday? Like, it's just so obvious. But I'm
Yeah.
really glad you mentioned that about worship too, because actually, this is something that Will and I were speaking about the other day on the phone. There's even kind of two ways that you can look at this concept of worship. One is more like the Christian, Abrahamic monotheistic perspective, whatever you want to call it. That is, it's like this. You're not just lifting it up on a pedestal, but you're also like lowering yourself down. It's like this very hierarchical, like, we're not worthy.
Mhm.
You're perfect and pure, and I'm just this wretched, filthy sinner down here. Like, I
Right.
can't. All I can do is get as low as I can to the ground. um, that's
Yeah.
one thing, but the what I would say is a actual, like, I would reject that one. That's just bullshit. Nobody should be doing that. What I would say is a proper use of the word is more of veneration.
Mm.
It's just uh, singing the praises of, or just acknowledging, like you said, the worth of something. It doesn't mean that you have to be groveling, or that like you're lesser than, or any of that stuff, because like, even from the pagan perspective, you are worshiping these deities, but not because you think you're this filthy piece of crap, and they're like perfect and holy. It's just, you're just recognizing the divinity, and the what's worthy of being revered in that way. I mean, nature is beautiful, and nature is majestic and worthy of praise. And so, whether you're giving that a name and a face, or you're just speaking directly about some aspect, whether it's a sunset or a storm or whatever, um, you're just, I mean, like, if you're marveling at the power of a storm, you're not talking about how like crappy you are. You're just acknowledging the power there, and
Right.
feeling that respect. Right? There's a lot of respect when it could, and that's another thing that ties into this. Just because you respect something doesn't mean you disrespect yourself, or
Right.
that you're not respectable. You're just giving credit where credit's due, and just being like, wow, that's amazing. I love
Mm.
you.
Yeah, well said, man. I mean, this is, part of the what I call the disconnect from nature. People don't have to worry about, you go to the grocery store and get your food, right? But if you were actually growing your own food, when that rain came, you were like, fuck yes, thank you. We needed that rain, or the sun comes out. I mean, we can do that nowadays, right? And like John, what you were saying about Christmas time, right? Well, that's a pagan holiday. They're just worshiping the sun. Yeah, because the sun
Yeah,
gives life to everything. Like,
exactly.
it's like,
Yeah,
Right.
I
That's
mean that's
worthy of praise.
right.
sure.
And that's where you see the inversion. And I think it's interesting where we talk about these terms and they all have a positive and a negative connotation.
Yeah.
And it's like that negative connotation is what inverts everything. But if you were able to see it from the positive connotation, then you could, be more aware of, it's okay to like say, yeah, I am worshiping the sun. Like, of course, why wouldn't I? I am happy that it's coming back. It's not staying down forever, at the bottom of the Southern Cross and never returning. It's
Mm.
it's coming back. It's worthy of celebration, right?
Yeah.
Um,
I,
and
I
even
do
the
like
And
people.
that's
veneration. I like how you said veneration. Sorry to interrupt, John. Go ahead.
no,
No, no, no, that's good.
and that's why I tend to try to steer clear of that, because that negative aspect is very present in this perspective, whether it's inherent to the scriptures. You can argue that, whatever, but there's no disputing it shows up a lot, like a lot, with practitioners of this, and acceptors of this faith or belief system, whatever. It's the inherent self-loathing with it. That's
Mm.
the difference between those two types of worships. For example, is all this original sin, like self-loathing, and like we were talking about, savior complex. Oh, I don't have any strength on my own. All my strength comes from God because I'm just a pathetic human. And I mean, it's just all throughout. It's just get rid of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cult mentality, right? My way is the only way, and
Yeah.
if you're not walking that, then fuck you, you're gonna die. Type of mentality. That's brutal the way I said it, but that's ultimately how it is. I mean,
When
Christians
you're not
are.
euphemizing.
I'm not euphemizing whatsoever. Exactly. And and ultimately this creates the belief in human authority, right? Humans are bad inherently, right? They're bad,
Yes.
so we need a savior, a leader,
It's
government,
the
all this kind of
same
stuff.
mentality, just
Correct.
applied to a celestial plane or on the terrestrial plane. But it's
Mm,
the mindset that paves the way to these, to a spiritual dominant, structure, and in the physical world through governments.
yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
I really see for humanity the evolutionary process in the future, the potential future, right? Really coming around to more of an animistic worldview and interaction. That's really what I see it. That's why this topic is dear to me, and I try to talk about it a lot too. I think it's something it's based in truth, it's based in nature,
Freedom too.
absolutely 100% based in freedom, and it's useful, right? I mean, it's pragmatic, it's applicable. I mean, so
I really think that it may be a way of weeding out the people who don't have the eyes to see. Because, like, for example, what's the number one rule they ask you if you want to go to a Freemason hall, right?
Do you
is there a
believe in
higher
God?
power?
Do you believe in a higher power?
Hmm.
It doesn't have to be any specific God, doesn't matter what spirit or whatever it is. Do you believe in a higher power? And if you don't, you can't come in, right? And it's like that goes along exactly with what we're saying, because it's yeah, it's just it's the belief in something bigger than yourself, but not from the perspective, like you're saying, that negative aspect of, I'm worthless, and I have to just turn everything over to this entity. And that really feeds into the belief in government, the belief in authority.
Yeah.
Yeah, well said.
All right, well, man, I feel like we could just keep going on and on about this topic, but
It's
we
a
got
good
to
one.
end somewhere.
Hour and a half, that was solid, man. We got to do a round two at some point,
Sure,
and
I'm down.
we'll go even deeper.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Any final words, Logan? Any plugs? Go ahead and plug your work again.
Sure. If whoever's watching, if you enjoyed this, come on over to the Wizard Factory and check out my content. You can check out the website, wizardfactory.com, thewizardfactory.com. There's, you can access the audio podcast there, all the social media links as well. Do follow me on the relevant tyrannical platforms, and check out my merch store. Check out the free initiation package that's on the website as well. It's a free mini course that I put together. We'd love to have you.
Yeah, and I've been checking out your work really from day one, Logan, and we became really good friends, so I appreciate you very much. Your work is fantastic. I can't recommend it enough. I think people definitely go to the wizardfactory.com, check out the initiation package. There's fantastic tools there that Logan made, and it's really good stuff, man. So I appreciate you coming on, brother.
Thanks so much. It was a real pleasure having this conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Logan. I appreciate you. And Will, I appreciate you as well.
Likewise, brother.
Much love.
And everybody remember that freedom is the natural state of mankind. So let's return to nature. Peace.
Yeah.
The intention of Natural Freedom League is to expand the understanding of natural law, which is based on objective morality, and to expose the illegitimacy of the belief in authority, and thus the inherent immorality of all government. We be the Natural Freedom League, cause we become no longer unvegan. We seek in the wisdom, and that's why we did come to this prison of prism. And that's why the beat thumps, and that's why we speak up. We be the Natural Freedom League, cause we become no longer unvegan. We seek in the wisdom, and that's why we did come to this prison of prism. And that's why the beat thumps, and that's why we speak up. We be the